Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from in this world. Welcome to Message to Movement, Winning at Being You. I'm your host, Coach Mills Rogers. This is a space where we have real conversations with people who are using their voice, their experiences, and their purpose to create impact, not just for themselves, but for others. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing or having a conversation with Kimberly Clark. We're going to be talking about leadership, transformation, and what it actually looks like to win at being who you are without pretending or performing. If you're watching live, feel free to drop where you're watching from in the comments. Now, let's get into it. Kimberly Clark is an award-winning Navy veteran, best-selling author, national speaker, and certified peer support specialist whose life story stands as a blueprint of resilience and transformation. After surviving military sexual trauma, addiction, and the internal collapse that followed, she rebuilt her life from the ground up. Her journey has been shared on TBN, on the steps of the Louisiana State Capitol, and in rooms where people are ready for honest, transformational conversations about courage, identity, and resilience. Today, Kim equips teens, educators, and parents with practical tools rooted in emotional intelligence, spiritual wisdom, and real-world experience. With that being said, Kim, I appreciate having you on. This is Women's History Month, and so you have the honor of being the first woman that I talked to this month for our series. So thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. That is an honor. So that's big. Thank you.
So my first question for people who may not know your story yet, can you take us back for a moment? Who was Kim Clark before the transformation that people see today?
Hooey, man, there's a lot to that Kim. I like to say that I went from Kim to Kimberly. I love to use that analogy, but I went through a lot of childhood trauma, bullying, being touched inappropriately, having a lot of insecurities about myself, a lot of limiting beliefs about who I was. And so there was a trauma. And then I went to the military. And actually thrived. I love the military. I love serving my country. I love my job. I was an operations specialist, and I endured a MST, which is a military sexual trauma in the military as well. And so that led me down a path of addiction, 15-year path of addiction, to where I just completely lost who I was, kind of lost my mind. I hadn't really had a sense of identity before that anyway, so I can't really say I lost my identity because I didn't really know what it was anyway. And so who you're looking at today, I literally rebuilt my life from scratch. I've been sober 5 years now, but before that, like, I was literally homeless. I was a homeless veteran, a homeless addict, doing any and everything to get high and stay high. So that was from Kim to Kimberly in a nutshell.
I appreciate you sharing that and, just being vulnerable. And so when did you realize you had to change? When did you realize that you had to go from Kim to Kimberly? What clicked?
I get asked that question a lot, but I don't think it was just this one moment that happened. I know, you kind of hear stories about addicts and people who come out of addiction that they had this big epiphany, this spiritual awakening, and just one thing happened and it changed their mind. That's not my story. A lot of things happened that should have changed my mind over those 15 years, but, it didn't. In 2020 alone, I relapsed after being clean for about maybe a year or so. And within like 8 months, I lost my apartment. I lost my truck. I flipped my truck 7 times. Literally, while I was in it, I walked out of it without a scratch. That is nothing but the grace of God, right? I got hit in the back of the head twice in an attempt to take my life. I was given bad drugs twice in an attempt to take my life. And I ended up on life support after that. Woke up after being on life support for a few days at the VA. Didn't know what happened. But that didn't stop me from using, though. That didn't stop me from literally destroying my life. But I can say at the end of 2020, when I went home to Castor, Louisiana, where I was born and raised, to spend some time with my mom and my kids for Christmas. And my mother, before I was leaving back out to go back to Shreveport, to go back to continue getting high in this little motel I was staying at, she told me that, Kim, you can come back if you need to. And I heard my mother so many different times. So she had every right not to allow me in her house, not to allow me, to come back, all the things, right? She had every right. She said, Kimberly, you can come back if you need to. And so then I had a plan. Like, I didn't have to be in that motel. I didn't have to be out in the street. I'd had a plan then. So now I can come home. What has to happen then, right? And so I left. I went back to that motel. Something didn't feel right after that. I didn't feel right after that. I didn't feel right getting high. It didn't feel good like it did before. And so I believe a series of things happened to where, the way I love to explain it is God literally took my heart and flipped it during that time period. And he changed my heart. Only he could have done that. I tried so many times to get clean. Nothing worked. Rehab after rehab, psych ward after psych ward, jail, in and out of jail, 15 years. I tried everything, all different types of therapies. It was nothing but God, nobody but God, to change my heart in an instant. And so I went home, waited on the VA to get me into rehabilitation, and did EMDR therapy, and it kind of went from there. But it was a series of things. It wasn't just this, one thing.
Wow. Again, I appreciate you sharing all that. And, that's, man, it's a deep story. I've done some substance abuse counseling. I was actually in the military myself. I was a mental health specialist. And so, yeah, I had the opportunity to do substance abuse counseling for the soldiers that I served and everything. And so, yeah, I definitely heard stories along the lines of what you mentioned. And so, again, I mean, kudos to you. And so this process of, I guess, recovery and just the amount of resilience that you've shown, what are some things that sometimes people misconceive about your journey?
I think, and I had a limiting belief about this too, that people see an addict or it's an alcoholic and they're like, oh, every addict story is the same. Every alcoholic story is the same. They got high, they did anything to get high, and that was it. Pretty much. They kind of put us all in this one thing, this one view, that we all have the exact same story. And I think that's the misconception. All of us, literally all of us, even the ones still on the street right now, have different stories. We started differently. Where we are right now, their mindset it's different. And so I think if you approach every person who's struggled with addiction or alcoholism, the root of it is trauma. If you approach all those people the same way, you won't get a great result. You have to meet people where they are. And in order to meet them where they are, you have to find out where they are. You have to talk to them like they're human. And I think, when people find out that you're an addict, they kind of zone out a little bit, because addiction is looked at as such this nasty, disgusting thing. And you do nasty and disgusting things for your addiction. And so, if we can humanize people who struggle with addiction and learn their story, what makes them keep going back out and getting high? What traumatic event happened to you that you keep replaying in your head? What do you keep running from? We can humanize them, then we can help them.
So now where you're at, you speak to students, you speak to parents, you speak to educators. Mm-hmm. How did you get from that dark place of the depths of your addiction to where you're at now? What did that journey look like? Like, once you made that commitment in your heart, like, man, I'm done with this. how did you go from there to what you're doing now?
I think, well, to sum it up, like I just kept being obedient to God, right? I just kept being obedient to God. And you're gonna hear me say that a lot. You're gonna hear me, talk about God a lot. Faith is the biggest part of my life, the most important part of my life. And I kept being obedient to God. When I came home, as I said, to my mother's house and waited on to get into a rehab in Opelousas, Louisiana. It was a rehab strictly for veterans. I went down there for, I believe it was 90 days, and I was introduced to EMDR therapy, and that therapy literally changed my life. And what it is, it's a type of therapy to where they focus on one trauma at a time, and they get you through that trauma. And I don't know the science behind it. I'm not going to pretend that I do, but it rewires your brain to where you're not overwhelmed by that trauma. When you think about it, when you dwell, you're not dwelling on it all the time. You're not trying to run from it. It doesn't consume you anymore. And so all the different trauma that I went through in my life, I did it in EMDR therapy. Came home and started writing my book, started writing my story. I knew I wanted to write my story since I was a teenager. I even knew the title of my book when I was a teenager, but I did not know the extent of what I would have went through in my life. Never, ever would have thought I would be somebody who struggled with addiction. Never. I was so sheltered growing up. I didn't even know what cocaine or crack cocaine or any of those things was, literally. And so I started writing my book, Stuck Between Pleasure and Pleasing God. It took me a year to write it. And I talked about it on social media, to a lot of people. And they were like, oh, when your book coming out, blase, blase. And I finally published it, right? And then I started getting invited to come speak at churches and come tell my story and all these different things. And so that's how I started at first. I just wanted people to know my story. I got tired of other people telling my story for me. People tell how they experienced you, what they saw you doing. They love to keep you where you were.
I was about to ask you that. Like, yeah, how has that been? Where do people, because I had another guest, they had a similar story to yours, and I asked them, like, hey, how have people accepted the new you? The you that you are now compared to what they knew before?
Well, I mean, now it's a whole lot better. The whole narrative has changed now. And I believe that happened because of consistency. I was consistent. I did what I said I was going to do. My word is law. If I say it, I'm going to do it. And I was consistent about who I said I was, right? I was consistent in what my goals were. And I went after them. I just did it. And so the whole narrative has changed because of my consistency. Because, I just stayed consistent. So I believe that, I don't believe literally the whole narrative has changed. I've mentored people who looked down on me when I was in my addiction. I've mentored them. I've mentored their children because their children fell into the life of addiction, right? And so that kind of gives you a view of how much the narrative has changed since then, for sure.
So obviously, you've been healing. And so what does the healing process entail? And let me ask you this, though. Does it really ever stop? Does the healing ever stop?
No, it never stops. It never stops. You never stop growing. You never stop learning. I would advise everybody, do not always remain coachable. My bishop says that all the time. Are you coachable? Remain coachable. Keep your heart open to learn more, to receive more. You have to. You will never stop healing because we will never reach perfection. So we have a life that's going to always come up. We're going to always deal with things that are too big for us, right? And so we have to always be learning something new. We have to always be willing to be wrong. I will apologize in a minute. My heart, I'm always willing to search my heart and see, like, was I wrong in doing this? Was I wrong with the way I said this to this person? Could I have said it a different way? Could I've done this a different way to where they don't, have to feel this way? Because I don't never want to intentionally hurt somebody or, betray somebody or do something like that. Right. So I'm always open to learn how to be better, treat people better, and just be a better example, period.
And so getting to your current work, you now work with teens, educators, and parents. What are you
Mhm.
seeing young people struggle with the most these days?
Their identity, their identity. They want to be liked. They want to be liked, and so they do whatever they feel like the crowd wants them to do. They want to be liked. They're insecure. There's a lot of confusion around it. It all boils down to their identity. With staff and parents, I believe, and it's funny because I found this throughout all leadership. All leadership environments are pretty much the same, right? And I've kind of found this. I figured it out, like kind of in ministry as well. Like you always have somebody who wants to control everything. You always have somebody who has the best ideas, and if you don't use their ideas, then something's wrong. And you always have somebody who's talking about other people, right? And so there's always this leadership environment, this leadership atmosphere, no matter what workplace environment you're in. And so I find that a lot of teens struggle with their identity, but a lot of adults, they struggling with the same doggone thing, their
Oh, yeah.
identity, their identity. Yep.
And so in talking to adults, what do you find compared to kids? What do you find, I guess, the difference is or the challenge? Because of course I do the same thing that you do. And
Mhm.
so I kind of have my own thoughts on it, but I'm just curious, what do you find is the difference or the challenging thing with between the two groups?
I think more adults, like, we think we're right. I mean, our feelings are valid, yes, but we think we're right. And until somebody from the outside can come in and be like, hey, you may be right, but there's also another perspective that is also right. And so are you open to seeing it a different way? Are you open to receiving somebody speaking to you a different way? It may not be the way you used to, but are you open to receiving correction or receiving an opinion in a way that you may have not received it before? And I think, with adults, we stubborn, man. We stubborn. We want things the way we want them, and it takes love. You have to come from a place of love to speak to adults, because man, if you don't, they gonna see it right then and there. You have to come from a place of love, come from a place of you knowing what you talking about, right? And just be open to hear what they have to say. With teens, you speak directly to their problem because they ain't never heard it out loud before, right? They never heard the language
Mm.
before. You speak directly to their problem. You give them the language for what they're feeling, but they don't know how to say it. And I think that's the difference between the two.
Okay, very insightful. And that all relates to one of the topics that you're an expert in, emotional intelligence.
Hmm.
And so, why do you believe that skill is so important right now, especially when you talk about adults? Where do you feel maybe they are falling short as far as emotional intelligence and how it relates to the children? That because you are talking to educators most of the time,
Hmm.
so that their challenges of emotional intelligence, how is that impacting the children that they're teaching or leading?
I believe that we can only help as far as we've been helped or as far as we know to go. And I believe that a lot of adults, we stop at self awareness. This generation, like, we know how to diagnose ourselves because there's so much information out here. Information is free and it's easy to get. Information doesn't sell. Only transformation does, right? And so they have so much information. They know what's wrong. They can call it. They can tell you, what they're diagnosed with, what they believe they diagnosed with, what they think is wrong with them. That they can tell you that, but they stop at self-awareness. That's it. They're aware of it, but they stop there. and they don't want to move forward into really regulating what they found. And so the adults are stopping at self-awareness. The kids are seeing this happening. And so they are only going as far as they're seeing the people in their life, the people in their circle go. That's all they know. And so they think it's okay. As long as I know what's going on with me, as long as I know what's wrong with me, and I tell you, that should be fine. You should, not cross my boundaries. You should walk on eggshells around me if I need you to. But they stop at self-awareness, and they don't go past that awareness into the actual transformation, into the actual change, because that takes work. It takes work.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I always said is, we talk about SEL and everything for kids, but I'm like, a lot of times the adults in the building need it more than the kids, because, if we're real, being an educator, it's extremely challenging. You're dealing with 25 personalities in front of you every day for every period. And of course, if you're teaching at the secondary level, okay, you're going to have 25 different people in your class 6 times, 7 times a day. And so, yeah, it takes a certain level of self-awareness to be able to handle those kids every day. And oftentimes, nobody's perfect.
Right.
Nobody's perfect. No adult is perfect. And so we have to do a lot of self-work with that.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so, it is Women's History Month. And so since it is Women's History Month, what women in your life have helped shape you?
My mother, for sure. My mother, her resilience, her strength, her love for God. If it wasn't, for her putting that foundation of the Word of God in my life, I always say it like this: I wouldn't have known what to go back to. I wouldn't have known who to run to if it wasn't for her. So my mother, my sister as well, she was like a mother to me. She was like a second mother, right? You know how older sisters are, and I'm the baby. So you already know how that should go with your siblings, and they think they run everything. And that's how my sister was. But she was effective, and she still is so loving and kind toward me. And her resilience is, man, it's magnificent. But also now my spiritual mother, she has, man, her elegance, she exudes elegance. And so I've been such a tomboy all my life. And so I'm trying to get into the, my soft girl era here a little bit, you know what I mean? And she's a perfect example of it. And so yeah, my sister, my mother, and my spiritual mother, all three have been just, wow, just magnificent people in my life.
What do you think young women today need to hear about being strong and their identity and being resilient and being comfortable in their skin?
They don't have to have it all figured out right now. I think, we always like to jump levels. We like to skip the process. And the process is the best part. The process is better than the destination, because that's when you're becoming who you want to be. You're becoming the person who can handle what you're waiting on at the destination. And so you don't have to have everything at once. You don't have to know everything right now either. So give yourself some grace to learn. Give yourself some grace to make some mistakes, to fail, but learn from that. I've never met anybody successful that didn't have 500 failures before they finally found success. And so don't skip the process. Don't skip the hard part. That's where you become who you are. And you don't want to perform all your life. You don't want to do that. You don't want to be fake and pretending like you're something that you're not. I want you to be exactly who you are, because somebody in the world needs you exactly who you are, but the processed version of you. And you can't skip the process. You got too many people counting on you.
So you've had the opportunity to just be on stages across the country, and you've done some pretty big things. And so has there ever been a time where you're just like, wow, I can't believe this, man, look at God?
All the time. all the time. I was a homeless addict. I was saying 5 years ago, but it seems like yesterday. Like, how you do that? I was literally a homeless addict, and now, I've told my story on the Louisiana and on the steps of the Louisiana State Capitol. TBN flew me out to Nashville to literally film my life story. Right, I speak on stages across the country. People know who I am across the country. People know my story across the country. My voice, something I never used before because I was so shy. My voice is helping people, is helping save lives, literal lives. I've had students come to me and tell me because of what they heard me say, they didn't commit suicide. They didn't take their own life. Because they heard, I've never heard my story before. I've never heard nobody say it like that before. And because of you, I didn't take my life. And so those are all the wow moments. Like it's always God for me. I don't ever want to get to a point where I'm doing nothing, because I'm not doing none of this. I'm not. As I said at the beginning, I'm just being obedient every step of the way.
So how are you finding these opportunities, or how are people finding you? Because I'm sure there's going to be listeners and they're like, well, dang, she's doing that. How is that happening? And then also on a personal level, how do you have that confidence to do that? To go out there and tell your story and, just unapologetically, and people are like, hey, you know what? We think that these kids at this school are going to appreciate this, or these educators, or it's going to help them better relate to the students. How are you having that, again, that confidence to do that? Because I've run across a lot of people that are super talented, but then they put up a roadblock for themselves, and they don't even step out. So yeah, tell us more about that.
Yeah. So I believe my confidence comes from my passion for other people. I carry a burden for other people, and to see them transform, to see them heal, to see them like really enjoying life, really loving on themselves for real. And that's where the confidence comes from, because I'm passionate about what I speak about. I research what I speak about because I did the work to be healed. I did the work. I did the work. And I didn't try to, talk to anybody else. I ain't try to get nobody else's advice. I ain't try to do none of that until I was healed. And so I waited until it was my time. I waited until it was my time. And that's where the confidence comes from, like my passion and waiting until it was my time, waiting and getting through the process. And to answer your other question, the speaking, it comes from, a lot of them come from where I've spoken before. I'm still getting, speaking engagements from that, or people who see me on social media, or even I do my own outreach. I have a virtual assistant who does outreach for me weekly as well. And so it comes from a lot of different places. You got to have a lot of moving parts at all times, building a business, any business. And so I'm definitely, I have a lot of moving parts going on.
So you've lived through some pretty difficult experiences, and obviously you've come out stronger and on the other side. What is a piece of wisdom, advice that you carry now that you wish you had known earlier in life?
Like, don't be transactional. And I'm gonna say it like this. You having the heart that you have, and I know somebody who's listening to this, that the person who will receive this will receive this. You having the heart that you have, you loving deeply and as big as you do, you may see it as a curse right now. You may hate that you have such a big heart, that you love people so much, because people hurt you so much, because they take advantage of you, they use you, they lie to you, they manipulate you, and you hate that part about yourself because you love people anyway. And you feel like it's because of your big heart. But that's the best part about you. That is the best part about you. You're just giving it to the wrong people. You're giving it to the wrong people, and you're not setting appropriate boundaries. But if you do the work, and what I mean by do the work, if you process all of your feelings, all of the thoughts, even the negative thoughts that come up, process all that mess, all that junk, you will get to that point. You will get to that point. But that your heart is the best part about you. Don't change it. Don't become cold. Don't harden your heart. That's the best part about you. And it's going to take you much, much farther when you learn to set boundaries.
And so, boundaries is a big thing nowadays. You look at TikTok, Instagram, whatever, they all talking about setting boundaries. And so with that, what do you think is the most challenging thing that people have with setting boundaries? And what do boundaries look like in your life also?
Mm-hmm. I think, it's not, the issue isn't setting boundaries. The issue is keeping them and standing on them, because people will make you feel guilty for setting boundaries. They want you to let them walk all over you. And if you don't, something wrong with you. And that's their literal mindset. And so for me, boundaries look like, me not answering the phone if I don't want to talk to you. I don't have to text back. I know that I still have to show kindness to you. Like, I'm not going to have an attitude with you. I'm not going to roll my eyes when I see you. I'm not going to not hug you. I'm not going to not embrace you. I'm not going to do anything like that. But this will be on my terms, right? I don't have to give you my emotions. I don't have to show you affection. I can answer your questions, and only that. I don't have to do it emotionally, right? And so for me, the boundary is not adding my emotions into it, if that makes sense. Like not letting my emotions get consumed in our interaction. I can just interact with you on a very strict, straightforward level. I'm gonna answer what you ask me, and that's it. We ain't going no deeper than that. And so that's what boundaries look like for me.
What does winning in life, since this is the Winning at Being You podcast, what does winning in life look like for you today?
Winning at life for me, I'm at peace. I'm at peace, and wow, that matters more than anything else could matter, because I haven't had peace. I didn't have peace for a long, long time. I couldn't even sit with myself. I couldn't sit, in a room without some kind of noise, something, I could not do it. Could not sit alone with myself. I didn't enjoy my own company. And so me being at peace, that's me winning. Me spreading the good news is me winning. Me being obedient to what God has told me to do, that's me winning. Me helping transform other people's lives, that's me winning. And just me being my authentic self. And I'm okay with it. That's me winning. Because we live in a world where everybody's performing, everybody's pretending, and authenticity is rare right now. And I'd say if you're authentic, you're winning.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's a lot of performative stuff going on nowadays, and I don't know, it amazes me. I don't even understand it. I mean, I'll look at a lot of things online, and I'm just like, man, how are they finding the time and putting all this thought to a lot of the stuff that they're doing, on social media? It just blows my mind. But to each his own. That's how I kind of look at it. So for someone that's listening right now who feels like they're just surviving in life, and I'm sure you would say that you've been in that position where you just feel like you're just surviving instead of living it, what would you want them to understand about their own potential and their future, and how they can start changing their life?
Mm-hmm. Well, it all starts with honesty. Like, everything starts with honesty. Until you can get honest with yourself, honest with another person, honest with God, nothing will change. I remember being in survival mode, lying to myself about how I really felt. Saying, oh, that didn't hurt me. No, they didn't just play in my face. They didn't just win against me because I didn't want people to win. I didn't want people playing my face. I didn't want people to get one up on me. And so I would lie to myself about what hurt. And I would say it didn't hurt and pretend like it didn't when it did. And until I could tell myself this did not feel good, right? I didn't like the way that made me feel. I couldn't make myself feel differently. I couldn't change how I regulated that emotion until I was honest about that emotion, right? And they say you can't change it until you name it, or you can't tame it until you name it, right? And that's so true. You have to name it, and you have to be honest about naming it. So honesty is always your first step. Honesty. You have to be honest with yourself about what's going on, and then you can be processed, right? Be processed on to the next step. And all that means when I say be processed is you sit down, understand what your trauma is, what your insecurity is, what your limiting belief is. Write it down if you have to. Figure out what that is and sit with it. Feel it. Just feel it. It won't consume you. It won't. I know it feel like it will, but it won't. It won't take you over. Just feel it and come out on the other side of it and then help somebody else.
Man, this was all so good. And so, Kim, what do you have? We're getting close to the end, unfortunately. But I mean, gosh, such wisdom. What do you have coming up? What should people be on the lookout for from you? And yeah, what do you have?
Okay, so I'm just doing more national keynotes, more keynote opportunities, period. I'm building out some programs for teens, but aside from, teens, parents, and staff, I'm also working on, faith-based side with women who struggle with some of the same things I've struggled with, some of the same things we talked about today. And so I've built a community. I'm building more digital products, things like that. And so yeah, I have a lot of things I'm working on now that's available now, like on my website. And then I have some more things coming down the line so that, I don't have to go out and get a flight for you to experience the gift God has given me, that I want to meet people, literally meet them where they at. So.
Where can people connect with you and learn more about your work or your services or your products?
Absolutely. So you can go to my website, KimberlyClarkSpeaks.com. And on every social media site, I'm at Kimberly Clark Speaks. So, yep.
Okay. Man, this was wonderful. And again, I appreciate you coming on the show. Women's history, and I think this is a great way to kick it off. Such a great story that I know women and men can relate to. So I truly appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you. I had a wonderful time with our conversation. Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And this is, by the way, this is my Louisiana homegirl. Just found out, she lives up in Shreveport. I'm originally from a little small town, Ville Platte, close to Opelousas, where you were at. So yeah, pretty excited about that. And so again, I appreciate you coming on. And so with that being said, change happens one person at a time, 1 second at a time. Can't wait to see y'all again. Let's go.